The Great Bait Debate. Which is the best bait? All on this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast.
Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek Podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek Podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Welcome back to a late edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. I am so glad you're here. Hey, it's not Monday, it's Wednesday. And this is a late edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. I got to tell you, every business goes through ups, downs, flat lines. So we are experiencing an enormous amount of busyness and growth. And I normally haven't worked on Mondays for over a year and a half now, that I don't go out into the field on Mondays. And the reason I don't is I'm doing this podcast. I am working on marketing. I'm working on the things that I need to prepare for the week to have success. And a lot of that includes online marketing strategies, things that I have to do, social media updates, and just generally working on that on Mondays. But it's been so busy that I'm working in the field now, where I'm normally in the field about 6 hours a day. So about half my day is in the field, sometimes more. I am working in the field sometimes now 8 to 12 hours a day out in the field. I was just out this last, the day before yesterday. Well, actually, no, yesterday, Tuesday. And last week at a park. We do some parks and here in the city. And the manager called me and says, hey, listen, I get a complaint from carpenter ants from two associations. Their park is like right between two gated communities. And they were complaining they got carpenter ants and it's the park's fault. So I'm most of the time I'm doing consulting work for them. And I'm going out there and I said, look, I'm going to go out there, take a look at the park. I don't think so, but I'm going to go look at that park and see if there's any nests or any carpenter ants. I go out there in the middle of the day, which is the wrong time to go but if they're getting that big of a complaint, there should be at least one carpenter ant I can find somewhere. I couldn't find a carpenter ant to save my life. And so I said, look, there's no carpenter ant infestation here that's causing it. It's probably in their community. I mean, they don't spray. They don't do anything in those associations. They don't, have a pest control company out there really doing it. If they do, they got a quarterly spray service, with permethrin or bifenthrin, and that's what most of them have. And that's about useless as, it's tits on a boar hog to do that in an entire community, especially the way they spray it. So I said, it's not your fault. Don't worry about it. I wrote them a letter. And sure enough, they're still calling. They're saying it's our fault. I said, let's go at night and take a look, because the only way you're going to be able to see it is to go at night. So I went out there with the park manager, and we went through that entire property about almost an hour after sundown. It was about 9-something. Walked that park once, looked at every tree, every palm, every ground, inch by inch. We were there for, a good hour and a half, walking the property with a headlamp. We found 5 carpenter ants the whole night. I said, look, you don't have carpenter ants, and it's not you. So, what do you want to do? And he said, well, let's just go ahead and just bait and do it just to, appease them and that we did it and write a letter. And, it's a whole PR thing, more than you actually are responsible for it. But at least they took the responsibility and said, we're going to do something, and we did it. And, that's it. 5 carpenter ants. I'm sure I killed them. I could have picked them off the wall and, been more IPM friendly and not had to do anything. But that's what, going on. We're out early in the morning and then doing commercial work and doing these kind of calls and these things, which most people don't want to do. And we do a lot of things that most people don't want to do, and we get the business. And I had hired somebody to run operations in the field, and at my best effort, best interviewing, best qualifying, best training, it didn't work out. And we are very demanding I'm very demanding about what we do, protocols, policies, and procedures. And just things don't work out, and you spent the time, interviewing and hiring and then training, and then once you're in the field, you realize the person can't really do what you need them to do until they're really out there. And that's part of the process of hiring people, is that can you get them to do at the end of the day what you need them to do? And unfortunately, it didn't work out. We, spent a lot of time and took a lot of my personal time to do this. But it just shows that you can get everything perfect on the front end and then still not get it to work. So I'm having to go out and do a lot of the things that were supposed to be done that weren't done. And that's just taking a ton of time. And it's par for the course. It's you live, you learn, you move on, doing these kind of things, in business. And it's part of growing. And a lot of people would quit after they've hired 2 or 3 people and it didn't work out. And they say, forget it. It's too much work. I'll just do it myself. If you want to grow, you're going to have to go through the heartache, the pain, and suffering of what it takes to grow that business. If you want to stay the one-man show because you don't trust anybody, you can't trust anybody, you don't want to go and risk it, and you're always going to be the guy that runs everything, and that's just the way it's going to be. And then you got to choose which way you want to go, but understand that there's a price to pay for that, and a lot of the time it is a heartache. But, it is what it is. Hey, if you want to join the conversation this week, give us a call, 707-395-7378, and you can join us. Also, you can write me an email, questions@pestgeekpodcast.com, and I do respond to the emails that you do send me, so thank you. If you want to leave a voicemail or a recorded voice message, you can 24/7 at 707-395-7378. I'd like to thank some people this week, especially Bryce Pickett, who not only liked us on Facebook, but also wrote a review and a comment, best informative pest control podcast out there. You can tell he pours his heart and soul into every episode. 6 stars. Thank you for the hard work. Hey, I like to thank you for listening, because, I can put out all the content I want, but if nobody listens to it, it's not going to be very good. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time to write the comment, and let us know, how we're doing. And I really do appreciate, all of the likes and comments and shares and emails that you guys send me, the instant messaging on Facebook. I try to respond to everything that, this audience writes to me, and I do appreciate it, wholeheartely. On Twitter, thank a couple of people on there. Progressive Builders is following us. Thank you at FL Remodeling, following us on Twitter. And also, AM 1240 WGBB is following us on Twitter, and they're at AM 1240 WGBB. Thank you all for following us and for liking our stuff, and just sharing. A lot of people are sharing our material. I really, 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 really do appreciate that. Hey, have you been in a situation, as the industry becomes more complex, there's more technology available to us to be able to control a lot of what we do in the field. One of them is to find out where your techs are and what they're doing, is GPS. You can put GPS on the trucks. You can also put GPS on the handheld devices. But to really find out what they're doing, taking a cue from the law enforcement industry, who's in a lot of turmoil right now, body cameras can be a useful tool for you to put on your technicians to see what it is they're doing, especially if you're putting a new technician out and you want to see if he's following protocols. What is he doing when he's in that house? How is he moving around? What is he doing on his own that he wouldn't do when you're there? How many times is he making a trip to a truck, walking back and forth? I mean, part of being lean is identifying waste. If that technician is making 3 trips to get the same tool, why is he spending that time? And sometimes when you're there and you're observing, they behave in a different way than when you're not there. And how do you know? How do you know they're not going through the customer's drawers and, checking things? Well, there's a camera that's called the ViewView body-worn video, and it's at viewview.com. There's a link to it. Check it out, because that might be your next management tool that you buy, and it's a lot cheaper than having a manager inspecting jobs. I mean, how do you know they're sealing correctly? How do you know they're doing, without having to see every single job? This thing can record up to 12 hours of video in the field. So it's a great tool. Check it out at viewview.com. In the book of the week, this is one of those books that I've been waiting for. There hasn't been really a good book like this in this category, I think, ever, that I've read. Most of the sales books that I read, and I have read, are all about dealing with objections and closing techniques. Okay, that's it. That's the majority of sales books. But this one focuses on probably what I think is the most important part of sales. And it's the part that people like to do least. If there's nobody out there that enjoys this process, okay, it is grueling. And it's the art and science of prospecting. Prospecting is all by itself in the sales, and without it, if you don't know how to prospect, you waste a lot of your time. And a lot of cold calling is involved in prospect. Okay? This book, Fanatical Prospecting, The Ultimate Guide to Opening Sales Conversations and Filling the Pipeline by Leveraging Social Selling, Telephone, Email, Text, and Cold Calling, by Jeff Blunt. Now, one of the listeners to the podcast turned me on to it. We were on, I can't remember if I was actually on Pest Cemetery and he recommended it. But Dustin Mance turned me on to this book, and he posted it, and I looked into it, and I said, man, this is an awesome book. I've been listening to it now all this week, and about 3 days, I'm about 2/3 of the way through this book. Now, I'll tell you something about this book. It isn't for wimps. It isn't for people that want to feel warm and fuzzy. This is, if you remember the movie Glengarry Ross Close, where Alec Baldwin shows up at this hard-nosed sales consultant, and he pulls a briefcase out, and in the briefcase, he's got a pair of brass balls on a string. Okay? It's a kick in the brass balls. I mean, it's not for people who want to be, told everything is great, everything is fine. This is a book about prospecting and about the hard truth about it. But if you want to grow your sales and you want to get better at sales, I suggest you listen to it. You can check it out. It's called Fanatical Prospecting by Jeff Blunt. It's a fantastic book, and I think this is probably one of the first and best I've ever heard, because most people do not want to talk about prospecting. It's just one of those things you don't want to talk about, because it's not, there's nothing nice about it. It's cold calling. Prospecting is all about really cold calling, and it requires a lot of dedication. It requires a very thick skin. If you got a thin skin, forget about the book, forget about selling. If you're going to get easily offended, easily insulted, you're going to get, easily hurt because somebody told you no, and you can't handle rejection. You're better off not even being in sales, because you wouldn't be able to handle it. So it's just one of those types of books, but I think it's a much needed book for the sales industry, to really, go out and get some. In the pest alerts, well, we got light brown apple moth in California. This has been widely spread in Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and since 2007, it's been in California, and there's a new quarantine area for the area of Ventura County with the apple moth, the light brown apple moth. And check it out if you need to know about it, if you feel you do something with fruit trees, or you just need to know what other host species it might attack. I got a link to that. Emerald ash borer, man, it's been in the alerts now. It's moving quick. Nebraska and Washington County, Harrison County in Texas, Union Parish in Louisiana, and Wabasha County in Minnesota, all in July, late in July, are all these alerts with emerald ash borer. So if you've got emerald ash trees, check it out, because you might find that in your state maybe it's also attacking other species. I got links to the whole list of quarantines for emerald ash borer on the site. In the news, this is a fun news. The Entomological Society of America announces finalists for the 2016 YouTube Urentomology contest, and a total of 40-something videos were submitted for this event. Check out the videos that made it, the final videos, and all the videos. There's link to it. Entomology Today posted this. I think it's really neat. I said the winner and runner-up will be announced in September at the 2016 International Congress of Entomology in Orlando, Florida. Wish I could be there. And all finalists will receive a Stinger Award. And in addition, the winner will receive $400 and the runner-up. The reason of the contest was to invite entomologists to showcase their talents and creativity through video. I think that was very fun. Check that out, guys, and give them some support, give them some likes, and share the videos. It's a great stuff. As I mentioned that, I've just been out in the field and dealing with a lot of stuff that just, coming our way, and you just got to deal with it. You got to bite the bullet and get it done, and there's no way to go around it. But I wanted to talk about I've been up, by the way, since 3 o'clock in the morning. I started studying for this podcast and putting it all together around 3:30. Went to bed really, really early yesterday. I went to bed 8 o'clock. I mean, I almost have to be sick. I'm exhausted. And this hasn't been going on for like a day or two. This has been going on now for about 4 weeks. We're deep into the summer. We're putting in some really long hours. And I just, Wednesday came around. I said, I came home around 6:37, and I laid down and I was playing with my son, and we were watching Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk, which he's a big fan of, the Avengers. And he's only 2, by the way, but he loves it. And so I was playing with him, and then he said, I want to watch Iron Man. So I put some Iron Man videos on and started watching and dozed off. And got up at 3 o'clock in the morning I get up, I think, it's probably about 6, or I'll start getting ready, and it's 3 o'clock. And I said, well, I'll just use the time wisely. Since I'm up this early, I haven't been able to do the podcast, and I'm not going to go anywhere for, at least 4 or 5 hours. Let me just work on the podcast. And I've been, trying to, get things that, will help you. I've done a podcast already on baits, but there are things I always miss, I don't cover, and I thought it'd be wise to go ahead and do something like this so it's about, almost 8 o'clock in the morning here, 7:58 now, and I'm recording this podcast, and, it usually takes me about, between 4 to 8 hours of studying to put it all together and record it and publish it and put it on the air. And I work on it usually during the week, and I'll get some notes, and that's a great idea for the podcast, and I think I'll do one on this, and I ran across this problem, and usually it's about my experience in the field. Very few of it is actually anything. If I do tell you if this podcast in any time is a study that I read and I'm reporting on a study, and that, but most of it has been my experience in the field, and that's what I share. So we wanted to discuss, I wanted to discuss baits, because inevitably I was on a couple of forums, and I hear people having struggle with baits, and baits been around a long, long time, but it's very, very difficult to use baits. And I'm going to explain why it's the difficulty. Once you get past this, you will be able to use baits more effectively. I had a call last week from a business owner, from a pest control operator in Texas. And the question was, he calls me and he asks, listen, I saw your website. I saw that you're doing natural stuff. What product do you use that I can, for my clients that are wanting a natural solution, to offer them that? And when that question gets asked, my immediate, response is, what are you doing now? Well, he's got 6 techs, very successful, doing very well, but he's a traditional spray company, and his techs are basically spraying one product on a quarterly basis. That's it. They're spraying bifenthrin on a quarterly basis. They're doing quarterly service. And he wants a natural product that's going to solve a lot of the ant problems. And most of the ant species that are in in Texas, are the same ant species we have here. So I can kind of help him and guide him on what we're doing. But it turned into a 2-hour conversation on the phone about what he wants doesn't exist. You can't replace a pyrethroid or neonicotinoid on a quarterly service with a natural product for ant control as a perimeter spray. It's not going to work. So, and I said, you need to get that out of your mind. It doesn't exist. Whether you're using Essentria or you're using Ecovia, it doesn't. We have a very limited application for natural oil products. And basically, it's for Hemiptera pest on shrubs or really good tick control after doing tick management. We can knock out ticks with it. It works very well. The combination of oils we're using to knock out ticks in a lawn, on a yard outside. And also for mosquito control for a one-time, you got a party on the weekend and you want a natural option to get mosquito populations down. It will work very well for 3 to 5 days. And that's it. You're not going to get 2 months, 3 months of control for an ant species with a natural spray product. It's part of an integrated pest management program. So I said, you really, really want to do is if you're getting and you want to reduce pesticide and the customer is a sensitive account, what you got to explain to the customer is that, a natural product isn't going to solve that problem. And I don't care if you're using also the one they're getting hammered everywhere on all types of social media is the product that comes from Cedarside. It's a great product, but remember, you got to use it according to what the label says, and there's limitations, and it doesn't solve every problem. It isn't a rotation product that you put and then say, okay, I'm not going to use bifenthrin this quarter. I'm going to use a natural product and solve a problem. It's not going to work. Okay, I've tried it. I've tried it to death. I've tried it on these are the insects that we found that works really well. Chewing, piercing insects. It works great for chinch bug knockdown. It will work, but you're not going to get 2 months residual. You're going to get 2 weeks. So on oils for certain types of insects, you're going to get a knockdown and you're going to get, so baits are the next best thing for reducing the amount of active ingredient that you're putting out. Because what you can do in a home, and we haven't sprayed the inside of a home. I'm telling you, I just did one. And I did it because the customer was from Texas. They insisted they get a baseboard spray. So you know what I did? I took my compressed air sprayer, a Virgin tank, and I took Cymexa. And what they were complaining about is they had all these spiders, and she was freaked out about this. This is a brand new house, by the way. Brand new homes are a real pain in the neck because that home was exposed for 10 months to a year, open, where all kinds of pests got inside. Second, it had water inside because people have buckets of water. There's water outside. The ground is being moved. They're bringing in sod. They're bringing in all kinds of construction material. And all those construction materials are in lumber yards and they're in warehouses and they all have pests. And you bring them in. And they think that because they got a brand new house, they're not going to have that. So listen, you're in for a shock. It usually takes us about 6 months to get all the kind of pests. You're going to start experiencing large roaches, which is the first thing she had. Then you got all these ant problems because you waited 6 months and you didn't think it had pests. And you're like, how do I have pests? So you have all these nests. Then you start having silverfish and fire brats and you start having earwigs and you start seeing all these kinds of pests. But I don't want any contamination because I got 3 little dogs and I don't want a baseboard spray. I don't want them licking it. I don't want them across it. So what do? Well, the only way we can start doing it is targeted as part of an integrated pest management program. And we have about 10 products that we use as part of that program, which is compared to the average guy, he's using 1 or 2 products. We use 10. and they're highly targeted. The majority of them are baits, and liquid baits and granular baits, which is, what we use, are gel baits. And I went ahead and I treated the baseboards with Cymexa, and then you vacuum up the residual and whatever. You use a very light amount, because you don't need, if you put in the amount, that they say in that video, that's a lot, and you find out you don't need it. So I did that, and then I took Cymexa and I took my bulb duster, my sweep, my de-Weber, and I dusted it with Cymexa, and I did all of the complete. They had done just some new trim work with crown molding, and we treated entirely the house, upstairs and downstairs, with that. Call her back a week later. How are your spiders doing? She had spiders. I mean, we literally saw spiders crawling everywhere, up and down the walls and carrying insects and outside. And I did it with that and just haven't seen another spider. So for spider control, Cymexa, and you can do it as a crack and crevice, or you can do it like a dusting, using it on your web duster. And you can spray it, because she had carpeting, and we just did a little baseboard spray around the carpeting areas, and voila, you put a very small amount out, and you don't need that much, and it gets control. The other ones we use for, like, American cockroaches, baits. German roaches, we use baits. Ants, we use baits. We don't spray. I haven't used a pyrethroid in 6 years inside a house. People say it can't be done. Yes, it can, but it takes a lot of work. And then having this conversation with this gentleman who has 6 routes to operate, I said, look, you're not going to get it done with a natural product, and here's what you need to do. And his answer to me was, wow, my guys will never do that. And I said, yes, they will. And let me explain to you how you accomplish that. And I got into a conversation with him about, listen, you set the tone and you set the pace for your company. And you have to be willing to do things. If you're not willing to do it, your people are not willing to do it. If you bring excuses of why it can't be done, your people will bring excuses of why it can't be done. But you don't start out buying 20 jugs of granular bait and putting it on the trucks and saying, here, spread this. It's not, because if they're used to spraying and they're going to spray pyrethroid anyway, they're going to destroy the product. That's the biggest challenge that people using baits have, is they can't put the B&G down. And I don't have a problem with B&G, and I don't have a problem with compressed air sprayers. I use 7 compressed air sprayers. They're all targeted. They're all labeled. They're all for individual use. I don't have a problem with it. Okay, I have backpack sprayers. We use them. Compressed air sprayers are not the problem. It's what it denotes that you can't put it down. And the minute that the tech, it doesn't work, or it doesn't work the way they think, they're back at it again, just spraying everything down. And you can't do that with baits. With baits, you got to get away from pyrethroids and stop using them if you're going to get effective control. If you're still using the combination, you're going to find that even if you didn't apply it in the same area, you're not going to get effects. So you got to be willing to put that can down and say, no, we're going to do it this way. The problem is you can't get 6 techs to start changing protocols, procedures, when all you've trained them to do is spray baseboards and spray perimeters with bifenthrin. All right. And I'm sure that's not all he uses, but that's all he told me he used for exterior perimeter. So you got issues with spiders, you got issues with scorpions, you got other issues depending on what part of the country you're in. You got to develop an integrated pest management program for your specific area. All I can do is guide you and say, this is what you look for. So we got into that conversation and said, look, you got to be able to take either yourself or take one of your techs. And then you get 10 properties. You don't start out putting it on the entire route. You take 10 properties. Okay? And then you start with 10 properties doing, and I laid out for him what we do and how we do it. And you take one of your best techs, the one that you think is the most curious, the one that's going to be the most meticulous, and get him to start testing and get him to start doing it. Then after he does it and he figures it out, how he does it and how he gets control, and this could take a year. This is not something you're going to do, but you're going to take 10 properties and you're going to work with those 10 properties for 6 months to a year, converting them over and getting it done. And then once you've got a protocol together, once you got something, then you start implementing it route by route. You don't take it company wide and try to tend 6 people at the same time. So this could take 2 to 3 years for you to convert your company to what we do, or something, or at least for those accounts that want something like that. You might just get one guy that you hire to do those kind of services for those kind of clients, and that's it. They don't handle every single client and every single. I mean, you got to find a way to limit the risk, limit the exposure, limit the losses, so that you can get it done. And baits, we got into baits and how baits are so part of what we do. It's like, you know, the 80% of what we use is probably bait for maintenance and for control. So how do you go around to use bait? Well, the first thing that you have to do is, number one is reality check. Just like there's no one product and no one procedure, there isn't going to be one bait that's going to resolve all your problems. Like I have somebody who will buy a gallon of gel bait. Well, if you've never used it, don't buy a gallon. Buy a 4-ounce bottle. You see? And then start trying it on different insects. And if you have 4 different insects, it might not work for all 4. What we find is liquid gel bait with boric acid. The one that we use is Entice Thickwood. And Entice Thickwood is a very versatile product for us. It comes at a 5% boric acid. Well, it's not really boric acid. A lot of people think it's boric acid, but it's the sodium tetraborate decahydrate, borax, and it's the same product in Dominant or Terro PCO. I like it better because it's so thick. I can put it somewhere and it'll stay there. I crack and crevice the heck out of it in underneath the counters, in the little cracks in the corners, underneath the baseboard, or the base of the cabinets where you have a little edge that you can put it and it stays there. Second, I water that sucker down and I can get it down to a 1 to 2.5% solution and put it in stations. And it works very well. I can put it on plates and it works very well. It knocks out great. Right now I have experience with it in using ghost ants, crazy ant, white-footed ant. I've used it for paver ants. Works very well for paver ants. So those 4 ants, I know that if I walk into a property, I can target it with that bait because I've already have experience with it. So you need to figure out how does it work for your property, for the insects that you're dealing with. The second, you got to decide, is that ant a glucose feeding ant or is it a protein feeding ant? Is it the time of the year when it's feeding on protein or is it the time of the year when it's mostly consuming glucose? If you put out a glucose bait when the ant is primarily consuming proteins, not going to touch it. So you need to know what type of ant you're dealing with, and what is that ant able to handle a granular bait? I mean, if you've got a little ghost ant and you've got granular bait, and if you've seen how little that mandible is, she might not be able to pick it up. But they can pick up water. They can pick up the more soluble product. You see? So now you have to decide and know that ant and know the feeding habit of that ant. The problem with gel baits, any gel bait, I don't care which one it is, if an ant falls inside that gel bait and dies there, the product gets rancid. They're not going to eat it. So if you got a station, full of ants that fell in there and died, you got to throw that station out. Liquid bait requires repeated, even granular bait requires repeated applications. You can't wait. If you're on a spray program, you can't go out. If you've got an ant problem and you baited, if you're not coming back within a week to find out if it worked, you don't know if it's working. If you're not following up, and that's for anything, if you're not following up. So the difference between a callback and a follow-up is, on the follow-up, you were proactive. On the callback, you were lazy. See the difference? It's all how the customer views it. If you tell the customer, I got to come back in a week and inspect this, you're being proactive. If you wait for the customer to call you in a week and say, what you did didn't work, now the customer's complaining, and that's a callback. In the customer's mind, you failed if he had to call you. If you called him, you're being successful because you're figuring out what works and what doesn't. There's a big difference. It's all up in the mind of the customer. So you've got granular baits. Well, in gel baits and in granular baits, which are the two types of baits. I mean, it's a liquid. A gel is, you can water it down. Some are gels, some are not. But the active ingredients vary. There's a lot of products out there, like Entice and Taro with the sodium tetraborate decahydrate. Then you have a product like Ant Gourmet, disodium octabate tetrahydrate, which is the same product that you find in Nibor-D and Mop Up. Now, this is a heat-treated borax product that becomes water-soluble. So if you put it in water, it will dissolve. And you can apply this either in a gel bait, or you can also apply it as a crack and crevice if you're a food service facility, or even if, you pull that. Here's the thing: you make it a bait. How do you make it a bait? Well, here, if you pull this kitchen forward, and all of a sudden, right between that stove and the kitchen, there's that big wall of grease that goes all the way down to the floor because they didn't clean it. They don't ever pull their stove forward. They don't ever clean that ever. And guess what? You're not going to get them to clean it. It's a losing proposition to keep telling the customer to clean. What do? Turn that entire wall into a bait station. Crack and crevice those kitchen. You can spot treat that side wall with a product like Nibor-D and turn that entire wall into a wall of bait. And then you solve that problem. You take the oil and you take the whatever's there, the gunk, the organic matter that's decomposing, and turn it into bait by switching it up. You got products like Amdro, which is sodium tetraborate pentahydrate, and then you have borate rods, which are anhydrous disodium octabrate, and those are like for treating pieces of wood. You drill a hole, you put it into the piece of wood, and it treats the whole wood. And it's a very limited use product, but there's a couple of I've got a sheet there on all types of borate products that you can get from NPIC that you can look at. And the advantages of baits is that you have more classes of insecticides, of active ingredients to choose from. And that choice makes it difficult because now you have to use more products, but you have more products you can rotate versus just saying, I'm going to use, deltamethrin, and then I'm going to use bifenthrin. And, it's the same class. It's the same, the only difference between one and the other is that one of them becomes a repellent and the other one doesn't. And one of the things bifenthrin is not, even though it's classified as a pyrethroid, it's not repellent. Because it's missing one of the ingredients to make it a repellent, which is part of what causes the GABA receptors. So that I forgot now. It's GABA, not nano, but it'll come to me. I'll get you that. But you got more classes. You got neonicotinoids, class 4. You've got class 22, like indoxacarb. You can, Advion uses indoxacarb, and you can get it for insect, for fire ant. You can get it in a granule. You can get a granular bait. There's also, in the same class 22, metafluoromazone, which is a siesta fire ant bait. It's the same as the indoxacarb, and it's approved for use in California. So for fire ant bait, there's a product that you can use, which is a completely different active ingredient. It's a class 22. And then Max Force, which uses mostly fipronil. It's a class 2. And you can use that in ant and roach stations. Ant and roach bait, fire ant granules, regular insect granules, carpenter ant granules. So if you got carpenter ants, it's a great product. Hydromethanol is a class 20. And it's Max Force Complete. It comes in also in bait stations and in granular bait and in roach and fire ant. Then you have abamectin, which is Advanced 375A. Now, Advanced 375A works great. It's a class 6 protein-based bait. So if you're dealing with ants that are in protein mode, or they're protein insect, it will grow great at that time of year. You have to know when you're going to apply this. The question then becomes, which is the best one? Well, in product, like we carry on my truck, I'll carry 3 different granular baits. I'll carry right now, because of the rain, for my regular preventive outdoor service for baiting. I'm using the Nyban, okay, because it will last in rain a little bit longer. If I have to use a specific insect like carpenter ant, or we've got a lot of crazy ant outside and I need a quick knockdown, I'm going to use the Max Force Complete. I'm also carrying the Invict imidacloprid. It works. It works to control populations outside of American cockroaches. Works great, but it's not as quick as the Max Force Complete. I found Max Force Complete is a lot faster than the Invict Express to controlling American cockroaches inside property. So I get a real series where the excrement is protruding out of the walls because the infestation is so big. The Max Force Complete is knocking it down very, very quickly. Within 2 weeks, we can go back, inspect, and see a major decline in heavily infested places with American cockroaches. Limited uses. You can't put it out in the open. So you gotta, this is baiting is for outside. You can scatter it, but indoors, you got to put it in crack and crevice. Now, how do you put baits in crack and crevice? Very hard. You got to get an applicator. We made our own. So, you got that little void underneath the kitchen and the cabinet where it's in the kick plate. You can't get bait up there. We had to make our own piece of equipment to get bait up there. And we made our own duster, and we made our own because we couldn't find, and I didn't want to spend $600 on one piece of equipment when we can make something for $50, $60. And we did. We've got our own duster and our own bait applicator for those specific applications. They're hard to get to. Made them with a couple bucks. So it's about getting it outside. Inside is about crack and crevice and void. You can't have it out in the open. There's limitations. Outside, your product is, the moment it rains, the moment that sprinkler system comes on, that product is done. Okay? But here's I'm going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages. Bait really won't last outside. Okay? If you're expecting a bait to last 30 days outside, you're kidding yourself. It's not going to happen. On the good part is you don't need it to last 30 days. If that ant is foraging tonight and they take it back to the nesting site, it's done. So really, even if it doesn't last, what we keep thinking in the market and customers ask for is, we need product with residuals. We need product with residuals. We need longer residuals, more residuals. We want to apply it. We want to do a 6-month service. We don't want to do a quarterly. And what you got to understand about baits, if you apply the bait and it's taken back to the nest, it's done. How do you know? You got to come back and inspect. If you applied a product and you come back in 3-5 days and the population is down, it controlled it. If it didn't control it. So I don't need it to last 30 days. I need it to get where it's going. We do 100% bait now outdoors for GHP. We started it a year and a half ago, and I'm getting the same control with baits that I was with doing perimeter sprays. Mind you, your cost does go up. The cost of good goes up. But you're getting people all the time is, will that hurt my dog? Will that hurt my kid? I don't want sprays in the yard. That's the kind of client we get. You might not get that kind of client, but that's what we're getting. So we apply baits. I said, the amount of pounds of active ingredient in a bait is so much less than with a spray application. Okay. You don't have to put out as much sometimes as the manufacturer says, unlike active ingredient dosages for mixing it with water and reducing the percentage of that active ingredient. You don't have that with baits because baits already come at an active ingredient dosage. It's how much is required to get control. What we do is we don't put it out on pavers We don't put it out on sidewalks. We don't put it out on driveways. We find the mulch areas. We find where the insects are, and we apply it there where the nests are. If we see a trail, we'll put it in the spot, in the hole, in the trail, somewhere where that insect's going to get it. Now, another baits require a long learning curve. You have to try and error, figure out which one is working and which one is not. You got to avoid using them with repellents. If you're addicted, you can't put that B&G down, baits aren't going to work for you. You might as well not put it out, because you're going to get it cross-contaminated. It's going to get damaged. If you're putting it in the house and you did bait in the kitchen and you sprayed the floors, the chances are you're going to contaminate that bait. You got to put the B&G down. The good part is, in nesting and finding nests, I don't know where the insect lives, but he does. You see, I don't have to know and follow it all the time where it is. I can put that bait where I find the trail, and he's going to take it back to wherever he is. That's the advantage of letting him do it with that. The how do you test for baits? How do you run a test? Well, I'm going to recommend a station. Now, the problem with the station is it is pricey, about $3 something a station. It's the B&G insect station. Okay, exterior, you can use it, exterior, interior. It comes with a lid and it comes with a stake that you put into the ground, and they all come separate. You got to buy 100 of these at a time. Okay, you might want to just order some online and maybe order a dozen, and so you can do some testing. But if I got a house that really, or a really sensitive account that they don't want spray or bait products put loosely, then I can put it in a station. In a lot of places, it's going to work just as good. And what I'll do is I'll take this station and I'll put it in different areas where I'm seeing the insects. But I will put out 4 different baits, and I'll put a little quantity, not a lot, just a little quantity that's measurable, something that's measurable, 15, 20 grounds. Okay. And then I'm going to put that station out. And I'm going to put that out, there and put it in the garden, put it inside the landscape. I don't like putting it around the property like I do rodent stations, because the landscaper or whoever does that landscape is going to destroy that case. So I put it inside landscape where it's cool. And I will come back the next day. And then I will count and see, what did the ant prefer? That's how I've done it. And I put 4 or 5 and I say, okay, they prefer this bait. Then that's what I'll scatter, or that's what I'll put inside that station. Let them take it. Come back in 30 days. Remove the bait. The advantage of using a station versus putting the bait out is that you're going to use far less bait than you use for scattering. I mean, like 90% less. So that's where you save the money. Second, the bait that's going to last longer because it's going to hold up from UV light destroying it and from water getting in. Now, eventually with the humidity outside, baits will get moldy. It's just a part of what it is. You clean it out, you put new bait. But you can reduce the cost, reduce the amount of active ingredient you're putting out, reduce the contamination, get better results, because that nest, if that nest is in your neighbor's house, if you do a 0-lot home or you do a small home with like 6,000 to 8,000 square foot lot, and you've got a 17 to 3,000 square foot home on that lot, it could be on the neighbor's tree. You're never going to get it. It could be 2 neighbors down. You know what? The bait will get there and knock it out. So that's how I do the testing. But you got to be able to come out the next day, and you have to be able to monitor it until you get familiar with the bait, and then say, okay, if I apply it here and I apply it there, I get results. I apply it here and I apply it there, I don't get results. Liquid baits, usually you have to put it right in front of them. They're not going to travel too far with that liquid bait. So the advantage, to recap, the big advantages to baiting is, 1, you can get rid of the nesting sites. Number 2 is there are much more active ingredients available for rotation. Baiting, like I said, has been very effective for us. It's 100% of what we do now for GHP, along with using IGR along with using Nibor-D, along with using Cymexa. Those are our baiting products. And we also use stations and the little Max Force FC stations in rotation with, we also use the DSEC station, for inside the house or inside a restaurant where we can't hide the bait. We can put it in the station. So like I said, it's a big learning curve. You're going to have to do some work if you want to get out of spraying, if you want to get out of just constantly applying the same product. Then, baiting is awesome. It really does knock out the infestations. It knocks out the nests, without having to, you do much work to know what you're going to put out after that. So guys, it's been real. It's been real fun. I hope, we might move this podcast to Fridays. I don't know. I might have to record it in the middle of the week and then publish it on Mondays. Getting really busy, but I'm getting so many, emails, so many comments and so many people really enjoying it that I don't see myself stopping doing this because I think the industry really needs it. I think it's I'm a voice sometimes crying out in the wilderness, and but I really do appreciate all the feedback, and it really is a pleasure for me to do this. So guys, until next time, have a great one.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.